Welcome back. Now, many of us have heard of police detectives, but how many of you have heard of railway detectives? An author of a new book, An Inspector Recalls, is a former detective superintendent, British Transport Police, who's received commendations for his work from Her Majesty's judges, chief constables, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Lord Lieutenant of London. Joining us now to tell us more about his memoirs and what a railway detective does is local resident Graham Satchwell. Graham, thank you very much for coming in.
Right,
so I guess, without wanting to go through the entirety of the book, if you could sum up in one answer, how was life as a railway detective? What is it about? What do you do?
Okay, well, all right, there's several questions there.
Yes.
But the book really is I think, is a sort of funny but serious look at the realities of being a transport policeman, a transport detective. 31 years from constable to detective superintendent, detective chief superintendent. The fact is that whilst most people don't understand this, from the earliest days of the railway police, the transport police, have been responsible for all sorts of major and minor crime on the railways right across Britain. And that's the book then is a humorous but serious look at the various sorts of crime, serious crime and not so serious, that I experienced. And so it is a tale of what the transport police do, and particularly the CID do, through the eyes of one person, me. So that's it.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's it.
And if there was a specific story or anecdote that you could share with us right now that is part of the book, without wanting to spoil every plot as part of it, what would you go for?
Okay, well, in fact, just before we came on air, one of your colleagues asked me about a particular issue, and it was this, and so it's only in my mind for that reason. But it was the first day as a detective sergeant based in London, and I'd moved from Southampton at that stage, and I wanted to meet the two particular detectives that I was responsible for, and they were at Luton Magistrates Court that morning. So I went to Luton, looked at the case list, and I could see there it was a case against a person who was charged with rape, and it was a remand in custody. I saw the officers' names, knew what court they were in there for, went into court, and the court was in uproar. The prisoner was trying to escape, and there was a fight in the dock. So I was a young, fit man then. I was a regular football player. I was on top of my game. So I ran across the court, jumped into the dock, and caught the first person with a lucky punch and knocked him down. The second one wasn't looking my way, so I managed to strike him well too. Then the prison officers came up from the well of the court, under the court, the cells, and pulled the prisoner down. I went, pushed him down, they pulled him, and we managed to rescue the situation. Downstairs, the prison officers congratulated me, then the magistrates did. I sat down in the court, and the two men I'd hit hard were in the court, and they came and sat right behind me. And I was aware of their presence for a few seconds, and one of them tapped me on the shoulder. And I turned around, and he said to me, "Are you Detective Sergeant Satchwell?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "Well, I'm DC Davis, and this is DC Ryan, and we're your two detectives." And what I'd done, of course, they were trying to suppress the thing. They were trying to suppress the escape, and I'd hit them both really solid punches. So there's a story that sort of is funny. It's true. It's not the sort of tale that policemen normally tell, but it also gives you an indication of the sort of crime that they were dealing with. So, yeah, I guess that would be an example.
And not the entirety of the book, but so the opening few chapters are primarily based in and around Southampton.
Yeah, because I think you've got to understand that when I joined the police service, I had no qualifications at all. I went to the Moor Hill School on the Harefield Estate in Southampton. I'd been brought up in Southampton. I thought I'd be a footballer. And I was offered terms at Southampton Football Club.
Okay.
But I knew I wasn't quite good enough, that's the truth of it. So I did building site jobs around Southampton.
Right.
And then drifted into the police. And then I was in Southampton Docks as a transport police officer for 3 or 4 years. It's before I was promoted on. So the early chapters are about Harefield, Southampton, the Dell, and Southampton Docks.
And what, I guess, interested you about the transport side of policing?
What, to attract me into the job in the first place?
Yes.
Nothing. I was a young lad, carefree, nothing much to worry about at all. I'd had a succession of dead-end jobs, and the spells between work were getting longer. My father was desperate. I met a young girl from West End who I fell in love with, and we've been married now for nearly 50 years. And she had a different view of life. She wasn't quite as wild and she had a much different approach. She wanted me to do something more sensible. She wanted me to get a job that I could make a career of. And that's why, under pressure from my wife-to-be and my father, I drifted into the transport police. I'd never heard of the transport police. It was 1968. So, yeah. So, no, I had no great pull towards it.
Seems like almost a poetic irony, being brought onto the straight and narrow and then becoming a policeman in your own right.
Sure, but it wasn't immediate. I mean, I've got to say that, there was when we were in the docks, there was a lot of petty corruption in the docks, and I talk about that in the book. And I also, that issue of the police not doing the right thing, sometimes my not doing the right thing, that I've tried to make the book unusually honest and frank. And some of the feedback I've had from those who've pre-read it is they've said that it's surprisingly frank, funny and surprisingly frank, which is what I wanted. There's no point in just skimming over the surface. If you're going to talk about, if you're going to talk about your experiences, then people want to read the truth. And if they can have a laugh at the same time, it struck me that would be the perfect balance. But I remember, this will be hard to believe for people, but I swear it's true, that after I've been in uniform just a few weeks, I was, I don't know, 19, and I was stood in Canute Road, down by the docks, looking back into the docks, on duty, in full uniform, and I happened to be outside Lloyd's Bank. And a guy came up to me that I'd known from the past, and he whispered in my ear, Satch, because that's what, Satch, he said, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? He said, are you going to screw the bank? He actually thought that I was part of some sort of robbery, and it's some fantasy he had, that I was dressed up as a policeman in order to, examine the bank. So that was never true, and it was never likely to be true. But you can see, therefore, that the background that I came from before joining the police was a non-traditional background, if you like. Yeah.
And finally, what I guess drove you to decide, I'm going to put this into a book? Have you done any writing before, or is this your first?
Once again, Ben, you've got two questions there. People over the years, when I've told true stories that people have found amusing or surprising, said to me, you should write a book. You should, and enough people said it to me that eventually I started to believe it. But I didn't necessarily have the confidence to do that. And then some years ago, about 12 years ago, I was put in a position where I knew that a book had to be written, and I was the person to write it. And that was a book about the dangers of counterfeit medicines. Mm-hmm. And I wrote that book, and people liked it and said they could hear me speaking the words. And I thought, oh, wow, perhaps I can do this. So after that, I thought, okay, I will write that memoir, and that will be a much more interesting and less worrying read than the one on counterfeit medicines.
Well, Graham, it's a fascinating insight into this book, and I hope, and I certainly will be interested to learn more about what it's been about, and certainly if the kind of little anecdotes that you've mentioned there are typical of what's to come, then sounds good.
Thanks, Ben. I've got to say one more thing.
Sure.
It's called An Inspector Recalls. You might have said that already, and it's available now.
Fair enough.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Take care.